You're nobody till somebody loves you. You're nobody till somebody cares. You know, everybody needs somebody to love. That's why humane societies are working with the Pets for People program to unite seniors with homeless pets. If you'd like to adopt a pet, contact your local humane society. You're nobody till somebody loves you. So find yourself somebody to love.
You're watching Channel 59, KUBD Television, Denver.
Hi, I'm Glenn Hughes, and you're watching the Tommy Bolin special on Music Link.
Tonight on the Music Link, a very special episode, the ultimate Tommy Bolin documentary.
I'm Tom Zutaut from Geffen Records. You're watching the Tommy Bolin special on Music Link to commemorate the release of The Ultimate.
Thank you, Tom. We'll be hearing more from him as tonight's episode unfolds. I'm Mike Drumm. This is the Music Link. Every week we have great brand new music videos and exclusive intelligent artist profiles right here. If you love music, every week you should be tuned in to the Music Link. Tonight we've changed our format. We're having a documentary, taking a look at the life of one of the great guitar players of the modern rock era, Mr. Tommy Bolin. And that is to commemorate the release of the Ultimate set that Tom mentioned on Geffen Records, a great compilation of all of Tommy's music. Because of that release, I decided to go ahead and put together the comprehensive look at his life. It's taken 3 months to put this together. There's been a lot of people who've helped. Two in particular do make it all possible here. David Drucker from Channel 59. He's the reason why the Music Link exists. And in terms of publicizing this episode for us, all thanks go out to Ira Gordon up at KDHT FM 92.5. If you're watching the first run of this show, you can tune in tonight, Saturday night at 8 p.m. for a special Listen Up concert series. The Tommy Bolin Band live at Ebbets Field, an amazing performance. That at 92.5 at 8 p.m. And after tonight's documentary, you'll be able to write in to win copies of The Ultimate on CD and cassette. Jeff Cook signed them when he was in town doing the interview that is featured on tonight's documentary. So stick around after the show and you can write in and win The Ultimate from Tommy Bolin on Geffen Records. And in just a second, we'll be going to one of our 2 commercial breaks. We urge you to patronize the sponsors who make the Music Link possible. And a couple of them we don't have spots for yet. Pasta J's up in Boulder, the great Italian restaurant, and great live music and wonderful food available at J.J. McCabe's, also up in Boulder. Check out those fine establishments. We'll be starting our documentary right after this.
Hi, I'm Jeff Cook, and you're watching the Tommy Bolin special on Music Link.
The thing that's most appealing about KDHT is the fact that we play consistently great music. Rock that people listened to 10 years ago, and acoustic music that people listen to today. Acoustic music that stands the test of time. We play the longest music sets so you won't change the dial. 92.5 FM, KDHT. Acoustic album rock for the Rocky Mountain region.
Albums on the Hill is Colorado's premier used record store. Named Best of Denver by Westword and Best of Boulder by the Daily Camera, Albums offers a collection of over 50,000 titles covering the whole spectrum of musical tastes. Albums boasts a large selection of used CDs and proudly guarantees what it sells. Known as the home of the hard to find, Albums also offers the best of new records, tapes, and CDs. Don't miss Albums on the Hill, the vinyl frontier.
If you've been searching for that special acoustic instrument, your journey has ended at HB Wood Songs, the acoustic music specialist. We have one of the largest selections of guitars, banjos, violins, cellos, mandolins, and dulcimers. From makers such as Alvarez, Taylor, Washburn, Santa Cruz, Guild, Gibson, and of course, vintage Martins. Repairs, rentals, and mail orders available, along with personalized lessons. So call or stop by. We're at 1611 Pearl Street in Boulder, Colorado. HB Wood Songs, the acoustic music specialist.
With the release of Tommy Bolin, The Ultimate, on Geffen Records, a number of lost pages of musical history have been lovingly restored. The 23 tracks on the anthology powerfully demonstrate that Bolin was one of the most talented musicians of the rock era. From his stunningly brilliant guitar playing to the incredibly broad scope of musical styles he mastered, Tommy was indeed the ultimate musician's musician. On this very special edition of The Music Link, we will explore Tommy's talent and career with his family, his closest friends, and the modern-day guardian angels who are helping keep his music alive for a new generation. We'll also look at the sad and pathetic final months of Tommy's life, a period that still poses questions around the circumstances that led to his death of multiple drug intoxication in Miami, Florida, at age 25. Tommy's longtime friend, lyricist, and inspiration behind the Ultimate set, Jeff Cook.
Well, I think with the average great guitar player, what you hear is somebody that's learned other great guitar players' licks. You know, you hear in somebody like, I'm just trying to think of an example, but I don't want to bad rap anybody, but you can think of any number of your Bon Jovi, you know, Cinderella kind of lead guitar players that have learned a lot of the tricks of the trade. They know the runs and so on and so forth of rock music. What Tommy did was he would grasp the essence of what a great guitar player was doing, and then he would mold it to himself. He didn't steal licks, you know. He didn't steal somebody else's exact musical run. He would just take the feel of what they did and then translate it into what he did, you know. And I think that's what separates somebody. You listen to a Charlie Parker on a saxophone, and you know immediately that it's Charlie Parker or a John Coltrane. Whereas you can listen to a good saxophone player, and you won't be able to tell who it is, you know. And what they do is they make everything that they play them, not take from everybody else.
You told me that you love me. That ain't no lie.
There's one person who went through just about everything with Tommy, long-term girlfriend Karen Eulaberry Hughes.
In fact, it took me 10 years to listen to his music again after he died. But I was able to be objective, and I listened to it, and I heard a musician that just blew my mind. You know, someone who was just so ahead of their time and just so innovative and so talented that I just said, God, this guy was amazing. And I took it for granted. I'd hear him play like that every day, you know, and God, I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. It was like hearing someone new and fresh for the first time. So I'm not surprised at all that his music, you know, still holds up today.
Tommy's best friend from his days in Deep Purple, Glenn Hughes.
His songs, I mean, on Private Eyes and Tears are so amazing. I mean, they still live on, and they're still as strong now as they were 13, 14 years ago. If you just listen to his lyrics, and if the way he portrays his melodies, and it's just the way the whole thing about Tommy and his music was very, very special. If you're an emotional listener or player, and I think it's great that a lot of young kids can now tune into Tommy and learn from one of the masters of guitar. He was just one of a kind, you know. He was a gambler. He just went for it, and there was no goals with Tommy. He just went for everything and explored every territory of music. I mean, he would sit down at a piano and just make sure he would just everything. He would like jam on every instrument he could find, and he was just way ahead of his time. But as a person, which basically means more to me, that Tommy was the most beautiful person you could ever wish to meet. And his music shone through that. You could tell that he's just a beautiful person.
Brother, brother, I'm on my knee. I need your help to set me free.
the official Tommy Bolin archivist and one of the primary architects behind the Ultimate set, Willie Dixon.
I've listened to 100 hours of unreleased Tommy Bolin material. Alternative outtakes, live recordings, things with Tommy in the Beach Boys studios, jams with Billy Cobham, Alphonse Mousson, Jan Hammer, Jeff Beck, various songs that were never released, songs that aren't even copywritten that Tommy wrote. What I saw, or what I can say, is that Tommy was one of the most brilliant and innovative guitarists ever. I can say that and believe that, and I've studied lots of other guitarists. I can say it because I've heard that material. There are things in the Tommy Bolin archives that are unbelievable. I can't put it in words. The playing is phenomenal. Slide playing, acoustic playing, jazz playing, just there again, all the styles that were his style. 16-year-old kid playing Greensleeves better than you've ever heard it. So I can say from hearing those things that Tommy was one of the most brilliant and innovative guitarists that I've ever heard or been involved with. I think, to me, it's always been amazing that most of the material that is in the archives, 98 hours or 100 hours of material, was done within a 4 to 5 year time period. Zephyr, you know, from 1969 to 1976 is what the Ultimate covers. The peak of that material was written in actually a 3 to 4 year time period. All of that material, 100 hours of material. I don't know that there's an artist out there that has a compilation on themselves of that amount of material that is exceptional, unbelievable material.
He was so ambitious. I mean, he wanted so badly to be heard, to say what he had to say. And it's like he knew, you know, he wasn't going to have much time on this earth. He had so little time to do it. He lived and breathed music. He was just music all around. I mean, Tommy typified music. Of anyone I know, musician or otherwise, he lived and breathed music. I mean, that's what he was all about.
He was the most impish, open, loving person. I mean, funny and just, I mean, trusting, naive, you know, but naive in the finest sense of the word, that he looked at the world with a sense of wonder and was curious and positive about trying all new things. And he was very open to people, you know, and very, very supportive of people, you know, and with whatever tools that he had at hand, you know, he would help you. He was, of course, when he first arrived, then we were at the height of the hippie time, and, you know, he was crashing at crash pads and hanging out at La Petite Restaurant down on 17th Avenue and coming to the Denver Folklore Center where I worked. And one of the most amazing things I ever saw in my life, I want to get this in, is that, you know, this Denver Folklore Center was a musical instrument shop. And it was also a record store, and I worked in the record store. But in the musical instrument shop, we would encourage people to come in and sit down and play. We had chairs and couches, and, you know, they could just sit around and pick music. And Tommy came in one day, and I'll never forget, he picked a guitar off the wall and started playing Take 5 by Dave Brubeck. Now, this is a song that was not written for the guitar by any stretch of the imagination, and it's in, you know, 5/4 time, and it's a very complicated piece of music. He just started picking it out on an acoustic guitar, and I saw one by one a look of envy come across the faces of all the musicians in the room, but even more importantly, the customers that were walking in looking at music books and whatever were just like drawn to this guy, watching him play this jazz piece on an acoustic guitar. And I'll never forget that as long as I live, you know. And when he finished, he was almost embarrassed that he'd drawn a crowd. You know, he was so into playing it, it wasn't that he was trying to attract your attention, and it wasn't that he was trying to awe you or impress you. He was just doing it. And when he looked up and saw everybody staring at him, he was almost shocked. And it was great, you know. That says a lot about the way he was.
Someday we'll bring our love home. Someday we'll bring our love home. I can't remember when I felt so all alone. Someday we'll bring our love home.
Tommy Bolin was the product of a loving and supportive family from Sioux City, Iowa. Richard and Barbara Bolin always stood 100% behind Tommy. They knew he was something special, Special correspondent and Bolin historian John Benzinger talked to Rich and Barb.
Well, I told him, I said, you got to be the best. You're not going to get out of the picture, and he says, he's going to be the best of something. And so he tried football, and that wasn't it. He tried boxing, and he seen somebody get his nose bleeding, and he gave that up. And football, the guy broke his leg, and he gave that up. And he went back to playing the guitar then, and then I got him one at Sears, and he just stayed right with it, right? He played music as much as he could, right around the clock. Every time he had a little spare time, well, he'd be beating on that guitar, and I didn't know he was ever going to go as far as he did, but I know every place he played, they wanted him back. I took him to see Elvis, and he says one of these days he's going to be up there on the stage like that. And I said, yeah, you are. And then he got, I got a lot of Elvis's songs, and he got playing Heartbreak Hotel. He practiced on that, and we had him on Kid's Corner, and he done it so good that they had him back. And phone calls were coming in. And he says, you gotta get him back, because the phone calls are coming in. They had him right at the end of the play, and they didn't know he was that good. We got a school bus, and I painted it blue. After that, they Patch of Blue, the name of the group was. And with 100 miles radius here, we'd go, and one of the folks would have to go with them because they weren't old enough to play in any bars. And mostly they played at schools, colleges and high schools, and I'd drive the bus up wherever they wanted to go. Within a radius of 100 miles, that's about as far as we go out, like Old Kaboja and that.
You had to work the next day. What was that like?
Yeah, I had to get up and go to work at 5 o'clock, and that's about the time I got in, got everything situated. And there wasn't much sleep, but I sacrificed it. It was worth it.
Tommy's first two bands, both based out of Sioux City, were Denny and the Triumphs and Patch of Blue. Then, at the tender age of 16, Tommy moved to Colorado, which would be his home base for the next 8 years. Barb Bolin relates the foundation for that fortuitous move.
And one day, he called and said to come and get him. And I went, and he said, they told me to cut my hair. And the rule of the school was to cut it just to the collar. And we did. And he went back to school, and they said, now go back home and cut it above your ears. And he said, never. He said, if you can't accept me, I can't accept you. I followed all your rules, and they aren't good enough. But we tried. We went to the superintendent of schools and to see what we could do, because he did want to finish school. And he said, well, I can't see anything against it. He said, I've got George Washington here on my desk, and I don't see anything wrong with him, or did. But he said, I guess a rule is a rule. I said, but that isn't the rule, to cut above his ears. And he said, well, there's nothing I can do. So we went home, and then the next day, they came from the school and said to me, you're doing wrong by not making him come back. And I said, no. I have faith in him, and I know him. I'm his mother. And it's like he said, if you can't accept this, then that's the way it is.
And who was one of the first people Tommy ran into in Denver? Jeff Cook.
Okay, well, it sounds like the beginning of a bad novel, but it was a cold, wintry night in Denver. And I had a band at the time called Crosstown Bus, which we were rehearsing in a dress shop, in the basement of a dress shop down on about 15th and Welton. And it was a blizzardy night, you know, and we were in the middle of playing, and we'd stopped for some reason, and we heard this windows rattling, and I thought maybe it was the wind or something, but it kept happening, and so we went upstairs, and there was a kid in a big fur coat, standing there with a guitar case, you know, at the door, you know, just kind of looking in the door, and we opened it, and he said, "Hey, man, can I come in and jam?" And, you know, of course, we were ready to blow him off, you know. We wanted to just, hey, get out of here. He's a 15-year-old kid, you know. But he was so persistent that we let him come down and jammed, and he plugged in his guitar. We decided we'd jam on a song, Purple Haze, by Jimi Hendrix. And he played it note for note. It was unbelievable. We sat there with our mouths open, you know, this little kid just ripping off these guitar solos. And he played it note for note, and then he proceeded to turn it around and play it in his style and do different variations on the theme. And needless to say, the next day we fired our guitar player, and Tommy was the guitar player in the band. It was astonishing to, you know, I remember looking around at all the musicians in the room, and they couldn't believe what they were watching, you know. And that's how it began. We found out later that evening that he had run away from Sioux City, Iowa, and hopped on a bus or hitchhiked to Denver, and just was coming from the bus station and heard the music coming out of, you know, out of this dress shop, and just decided to knock and see if he could start meeting some musicians.
A volcano of dreams, a life slowly fading, has erupted and
Jeff and Tommy's band, American Standard, became well known at Denver's Family Dog. But soon, Tommy moved on to Boulder, Colorado, and helped form the now legendary Zephyr, a group easily the equal of any of the famous San Francisco psychedelic-era bands. And while they were a group in the truest sense of the word, the primary focal points were Tommy and Zephyr's vocalist, the late Candy Givens.
Oh, sure, there was magic. I mean, it was very exciting. I mean, you know, here's a girl fronting a band, and though a lot of people either loved her or were repelled by her, she was very exciting as a performer. And here's a young 18-year-old boy who could play guitar like no one has ever heard him, and people were responding to them. They were just bringing in the throngs. And the fact that they would play anywhere, anytime. They would play for any given situation. At any asking, people would, you know, have a benefit, you know, raise some money. Some people lost their home or got thrown out. They'd do a benefit. I mean, they were always willing to play. So I think that's what, you know, brought them their audiences. And they were different, you know, they were different. I mean, I remember someone saying to me once, Tommy's music will mature. This was at the Zephyr time, when he matures. And I looked at them and I thought he was as mature as he was going to get at 18. But I realized later what they meant, because they were just bashing their heads. She was wailing. He was trying to get in as many licks as possible. The sheer purpose of everyone hearing them and thinking this was their last, you know, chance to be heard. But they realized that they, like the second album showed, they mellowed out a lot. They had to, you know, become sophisticated somewhat in their style, because they were very unsophisticated as far as performing and as far as recording was. So I think that they eventually learned that after the second album. But it turned sour because of the disharmony in the group and the need for Candy and David to control the whole situation. I think that's what really was difficult for him. And the fact that they weren't going anywhere. I mean, they were the band of Boulder at the time, but the 2 albums, you know, were the big breakthrough, and that was wonderful. That was great. A band that, you know, got signed and did 2 albums. It was great. But then eventually, you know, the disharmony, and then they just weren't going there, because I think that dissension is what caused them to, you know, fall apart. But like you said, I mean, the struggles in Boulder at the time were the fact that there was a lack of money. I mean, you could play these clubs in a constant, you know, cycle, you know, rotating them week after week after week, but at one point you would be guaranteed that everyone had heard you. So I think, too, they outgrew the sound, they outgrew each other, and they needed to go on.
Tommy's animosity over how Candy and David mixed the Going Back to Colorado album pushed him over the edge, and in 1972, he quit Zephyr, vowing to me that he would never play in a band behind a female singer ever again. Tommy's next band was his all-time favorite, a group who never released an album because they shunned commerciality, the quintessential rock fusion band, Energy. Partially based on Tommy's bad experience in Zephyr, Energy's first incarnation was all instrumental. But eventually, Jeff Cook, someone Tommy could trust, was added as vocalist.
I've been trying to get away. Don't know what holds me. There seems to be no explanation for anything. Taken by a passing wind. Why don't you stand and still? Caught in a cat's cradle. God only knows who made it. Tired and worn out, wasted and shaken.
Well, I think that you and I in past conversations have sort of touched on this. This was probably the closest that Tommy came to realizing his ideal band. You know, this was what he wanted to do. It was a synthesis of different musical styles, and it was a group of personalities that he felt comfortable, you know, with and could experiment with. You know, we were very lighthearted about our approach to playing, but very serious about the music that we played. And it was a very non-compromising band. You know, we would not make allowances for what other people wanted, you know. And that was something we were faced with constantly. We'd go to clubs, we'd be playing in bars, we'd get booked, and they'd tell us to turn down, or they'd tell us to change this or change that or play the hits, and we said no, time and time again. And it was hard to do because we weren't living on a lot of money, you know. But we sacrificed that because you know, it was really for the sake of trying to do exactly what we wanted to do at the time. Now, you must remember that basically what we were was a blues-based bar band opening up at Tulagi's for, you know, John Lee Hooker or, you know, B.B. King or whoever might be coming through, Albert King, Big Mama Thornton. We'd come out and play a set, then that artist would come out and we'd back them up, you know. That was the essence of what we did. But musically, when we did our set, or when we were playing on our own, not opening for somebody, what we did was heavy metal jazz fusion, I would say. Now, there really wasn't a heavy metal then. We were loud. We were unbelievably loud. Tommy played through 2 or 3 100-watt Marshall amps, you know, and the rest of the band did their best to stay up with him, you know, volume-wise. So on that level, we were very heavy and cutting edge. But there was a jazz element because all the players were much more musical than a typical rock musician would be. You know, the keyboardist, the bass player, they all had jazz roots. And there was a time in early Energy when Jeremy Steig, the flautist from New York, had come down, and we played with him. That's where the name Energy came from. Jeremy Steig had an album called Energy, and that's where we got the name. So we were experimenting with that kind of music, and how do you make that work in a rock and roll framework, you know? And that's where it all kind of came from. But there were no boundaries for us. I mean, if we wanted to play, if Tommy wanted to whip out his steel guitar and we wanted to play a straight-ahead Hank Williams type country song, we'd do it. If we wanted to play polka music, we'd do it, because we love just goofing musically with each other. We had gotten word, we were playing at a club here in town on Colfax, and I can't remember the name of the club, but we had gotten word that some executives from CBS Records were coming to see us that night about signing us to a record contract. We had to do 2 shows that night. So it was time to go on the first show, and we were all a bit nervous and excited, and we looked out in the audience, and sure enough, there was Barry Fay with several, record company executives, and we went out and we just kicked. We were fabulous. I say in all humility, we were really good, And they came backstage and said, "You guys were wonderful. Your deal is as good as made. Great, terrific." And so as soon as they said, "We've got to go, we've got to leave, we're going to go on, and we've got some other things to do." So we started celebrating in between shows and drinking grain alcohol and, just going wild. And needless to say, by the end of our time off, and it came time to play, none of us could even stand up. And we went out, and it was horrible. Well, the record company stayed. Now, to some people, that might be a high point, I mean a low point, but to me, that was a high point because we totally blew it. We absolutely blew it, but we forgave each other and went on, And to me, that's a very special thing that happens amongst people that love one another and care for one another, But we absolutely blew it. We blew the audition,
The Energy experience, while exhilarating musically, was a financial disaster. But by honing his progressive chops in Energy, Tommy had become the heir apparent to the master, Jimi Hendrix. Accordingly, he became the darling of the New York jazz fusion world, and in 1973 recorded his finest guitar playing on record, Billy Cobham's Spectrum album.
Quite honestly, it was really just a session. It was just going to do an album in New York at first. This is what we thought. He couldn't believe Billy Cobham was calling him up and wanting him to come play on an album. He just couldn't believe it. But the chance to go to New York and play with jazz musicians of that caliber was just mind-boggling. And the opportunity was just phenomenal because the eventual outcome was brilliant. It was just brilliant. I mean, I cannot believe today how that album sounds and what he did on that album. But it didn't surprise me because this was a format, a chance for him to suddenly do what he loved. And to play on something like this, did he shine? Because he just thought to himself, well, maybe they just want me to lay back and, play a few licks. He had no idea they were going to let him play as much as he did, with that many musicians. But he was the guitar player, and he showed them, and they just were blown away. And I think that, it was just a nice time between the James Gang and Energy to do again, like I said, the jazz and what he wanted to do. But it ended up just being a one-album thing.
The gap between the mounting critical praise and his non-existent bank account balance took its toll on Tommy's dedication to non-commercial progressive music. In 1973, he accepted an offer to join the James Gang.
When Joe Walsh called him and said, "I've recommended you to replace me in the James Gang," that was a thrilling experience for him. And of course, we all said, "You must do it. You must. It's a great opportunity." And he realized that too. He knew that we were floundering here. And we weren't making the steps that we needed to make. We'd had this opportunity to get a recording contract. It hadn't happened. You know, we weren't really expanding our base of fans. And this was a godsend, really, you know, the James Gang opportunity, because it really forced us to write consistently together, and it gave him the opportunity to get out there and be challenged on a nightly basis in front of big crowds of people. And that was good.
Well, that switched through everyone for a loop. I mean, to go from the extreme of energy to the James Gang was just something no one expected. But he did it as a stepping stone. You know, it was exciting to play with experienced musicians who hadn't made it on a grand scale. It was exciting for him to work with new people and record with, you know, people like Tom Dowd, and the opportunity to travel, you know, to start making money. I think it was just you know, another new stepping stone to eventually go on to what he really wanted to do. You know, it wasn't the end. It wasn't, you know, his eventual happiness. It was just a, you know, progression. And it was good. For the time being, it was very good. I mean, you know, he was able to get music heard that he'd been writing and put on these albums that he couldn't have done with Energy or with Zephyr. And it was at this time that he'd collaborated with Jeff Cook and John Teaser, and they were writing some beautiful stuff, and it worked well with the James Gang albums.
Alexis, thank you for the pleasant southern days spent on the levee, throwing pennies in the bay.
Well, there really wasn't a style. There are some funny, I mean, a lot of the way that we wrote was I would write the lyrics and he'd write the music. You know, I'd hand him the lyrics and he'd go away. You know, I'd spend a lot of time sitting over a typewriter or pacing around a typewriter, knocking out a song. Then I'd hand him the finished product and he'd go away, and then next thing I'd know, he'd come back with the song and we'd play it in the band. Or we'd start with lyrics and music together. We'd be talking together and we'd start making up different licks and whatever. You know, that would be, but I think toward the end it was, we'd be on the phone, he'd be in LA and I'd be in Denver, and we'd just be on the phone at 2 o'clock in the morning knocking around ideas. You know, and he'd play a line, and, you know, musical line, and say, what do you think about that? And I'd say, well, you know, I've got these lyrics, and we'd just go back and forth. And I can remember being on the phone once writing a song with him for 2.5, 3 hours that ended up being on a Purple record, Deep Purple record, you know. But it was like, there were no really rules. We weren't formal about it, but it was a very easy process because he always had musical ideas. Constantly, he would do 3 or 4 variations on one song that I'd give him. You know, he might do a reggae version and, you know, a soul version, a rock version, a jazz version, you know, those kind of influences. It would change. And then he'd do a major key or a minor key version, you know, which would change completely the complexion of the song. So he was always experimenting with it and changing it and, you know, trying to fine-tune what he was working on.
Tommy's stay in the James Gang ended in 1974. By then, he and Karen had pulled up their long-term roots in Boulder and moved to Los Angeles. It seemed his musical path was starting to pay dividends as he finally got the solo record deal he was denied in Energy, and at David Coverdale's suggestion, was invited to join Deep Purple, the band who rivaled the Rolling Stones as the most popular band worldwide. Here's Tommy with Tim Weisberg and Barry Fay in a 1975 interview.
Well, I just did,
be quiet, man. I'm the host here.
He's
Barry asked Tommy what he did. Tommy, what did you do, Amelia? We're going on to shush. What are we going to talk about?
Yes, he's the host, right?
I guess that's what they say. I get paid more than you.
And he answers for me. No, I did an album with Deep Purple, which took about a month. It'll be out in October.
Really? October 25th.
And I also did another one that was mine, which will be out. Ask the host.
Is that before or after?
October sometime.
Well, I think Purple is coming out November 8th, and yours is coming out October 25th.
See? That's why I come on these shows. The host knows more than I do.
Well, only when the host happens to be so closely tied to you. It is really fun being closely tied to Tommy Bolin, because it's really not. I'd like to hear about some of the material on your album.
On my album, I used...
Well, can we take a vote on that? Would you like to hear about the material?
Is he the host? Yeah,
he's the host.
Now I've become the host. No, I used on my album, I used like... a lot of people you probably know I used... it's very varied from like... very varied, is that...
Sure. Quite varied.
It's quite varied. From like very hard rock to some jazz type stuff that I used like Lenny Weiss with Chick Corea and Airto and Dave Sanborn and Michael Brecker.
Did you stretch out quite a bit, or is it?
Yeah.
That's far out.
Yeah. In fact, I used to get fired around these joints around here, for playing instrumentals. All the time.
Yeah, I know what
Now they want me to go back and do more. So I'm going to finish the album at the end of the month and then go and mix it in London.
Before Tommy did the teaser album, there was no album that existed that had a ballad on it, that had a jazz rock song on it, that had a heavy song on it, that had Savannah Woman, an acoustic piece on it. There, at least to my knowledge, there was no album that existed like that that was geared at the rock market.
Well, some members of the group wanted to disband. In all respect to Richie, Richie was a very strong member. And the first meeting of Tommy we had was my meeting with Tommy. He was such a flamboyant character and a lovely guy. Just by looking at Tommy, you knew there was something behind all this before he even played his guitar. So I fell in love with him just as a person. He was a really great guy, number one, okay? But when he played guitar, he played with such abandon. I'd never seen anything like it before. So my thoughts about maybe leaving when Richie left were totally gone at that point. We had auditioned a couple of other people, but Tommy was just the greatest inspirational guitar player, as I've said before, that we decided to carry on. And the spirits in the band were regained at that point.
I think it was more business than anything. I mean, he wasn't a fan of theirs, and you may say that they weren't good musicians, but he was surprised to find that they were all really incredible musicians. They just hit on a good formula and took the money and ran, But again, it was another situation where he wasn't happy. A very, sad stigma that followed Tommy joining these groups was the fact that he was always a replacement for a Joe Walsh or Ritchie Blackmore in the eyes of a lot of fans, and this is what they wanted to hear. And it was very hard for him to be on stage and hear somebody yell, "Joe Walsh, where's Ritchie?" This is what haunted him during the English tour, was "Where's Ritchie?" Booed him off the stage. He played terribly. He just was so unhappy to be responded to like this. The reception was miserable, so his attitude was miserable, and that was just the end of it after that.
Shake,
So in early 1976, Tommy finally put together his band, the Tommy Bolin Band, to do his music. On the surface, it looked like the beginning of a long, great solo career. But in less than a year, he would be allowed to die in a Miami hotel room.
Well, that was it, that was what it was all about. All these bands, all the things he had done had finally come into fruition. He had the band he wanted. He handpicked all the musicians. he was going to play his music and no one was going to tell him to play Smoke on the Water or Funk 49. He was going to do Tommy's music, and he was elated. You know, he had the support of the record companies, the management, and everyone around him wanted to be a part of it, and it was exciting for him because he finally had some control. He didn't have anyone telling him what to do, and he was able to be as creative, I think, as he possibly wanted. But what being in all these other bands taught him was that you still have to be commercial. You still have to do something that sells. You still have to play what people want to hear. And I think he tried to stay in along those lines and be, you know, somewhat sellable to people. So he learned from those experiences, and I think he tried to do that in the Tommy Bolin Band and be, you know, creative, talented, and also free. But there are the restrictions, you know, there were the restrictions from the record company and the fans, and he knew he had to kind of stay within those guidelines. But it was a happy time at first, and also with having your own band were the responsibilities, and that was hard on him. Fronting a band was suddenly very, very hard. Also singing, that was very hard on him, to suddenly have to carry the whole show, doing all the vocals as well as the guitar work. He was terrified. I think the pressures suddenly started setting in, and I think that was the beginning of the downfall because the pressures were phenomenal.
Jimmy Haslip, now of the Yellow Jackets, was the bassist in Tommy's band and one of the pallbearers at his funeral.
In my case, it was kind of a shrouded, mysterious kind of situation. I knew that there was a lot of these things going on. I knew there was possibly some tension with Barry Fay in the office. There was possibly some tension with record executives, I'm not sure. His personal life, I think, had tension. Seemed to me maybe in his love life he had problems. He didn't speak about a lot of these things freely. You know, this was stuff that he kept inside, and you could really sense that in spending a lot of time, as we did on the road, that he was keeping a lot of this stuff that was bothering him inside, and it was, you know, at times he seemed very carefree and just kind of jovial, but inside was an extremely intense burning furnace, you know, which at times would maybe come out in little blurbs of things that he would say in a conversation, but it wasn't really evident that he was going through a lot. He would hide it. He would hide it. And I would try to talk to him about things. Sometimes we would talk about some very, you know, deep-rooted issues about music, say, and maybe some things would come out, and I try to get him to talk about some stuff, because, you know, I even knew then that it's not good to hold things in. You have to let it out. It's gonna eat away at you, and you're gonna end up getting sick.
Do you think that's what was going on?
And I think that was what was going on, and I think that's any dependency he had on drugs probably stemmed from that. You know, where I know that he might have used drugs as a form of escape.
The thing is, Tommy was this rising star, and here's his rising star that is there, and it happened real fast. And the people that were around him, the life in the fast lane, and it was, well, all of a sudden his star was eclipsed by all of the pressures and the people that were around him. And yes, as far as bad business decisions, sure there were people around Tommy that he could have said, I don't need you. You know, you're making the wrong decisions for me. I've been taken advantage of before. I've been stolen from. Yeah, there were some decisions or people that he could have cut off at that point. But from that rising star to it being eclipsed, and I see it that way. It was a rising star to it was blackened out by an eclipse just as fast. And that eclipse were all of those people that were in that life in the fast lane that were rising at that same success around Tommy. And I'm not saying overnight everybody had thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's not it, but just that whole lifestyle of the success.
Well, my mind has been exploding about some things that don't seem right. And my gun is cocked and loaded. I hope I get me some sleep tonight. Well, I know I'm wrong. It seems like nothing is right.
Yes, Tommy had a drug problem that contributed to the circumstances that led to his death on December 4th, 1976. But in putting this documentary together, I uncovered a large volume of circumstantial evidence that has led me and many others to believe that Tommy was indeed the victim of intentional foul play.
There's so many circumstances surrounding it that were just too ridiculous to believe. So I don't want to say what I think, but it's just still a very unanswered puzzle in my mind. I have yet to accept all the things I heard, because like I said, it could have been prevented, and the people around him could have done much, much more to take care of him, save his life. So you draw your own conclusions.
They called the doctor at the Newport Hotel where they were staying, and he said rush him to General Hospital. But none of them did that. And later, when they came for the funeral, I asked them why, and they said they didn't want to ruin his image.
What do you think about that, Rich? What the last night? When you got the news, how hard did it hit? I can't imagine anything worse than a dad losing his son, no matter who he is.
Yeah, I know. The priest told me about it, and I thought, well, I got to tell John. He was upstairs. So I went up and told John, and a lot of tears were there. We cried for a whole year, and as Pollock said, he says, you know, you cry, and he cries too. They stopped.
I was in my home in England, and with Karen, of course, so we all know Karen is. And I had the call, and it was, I just couldn't believe it, you know. And we both were in incredible shock. And the next day we flew to Sioux City, immediately flew there to be with his family and his friends, and just to be near him. Like, just a tremendous shock. It took me a long time to even deal with it.
Does that emotion still come back sometimes?
Absolutely. A lot.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
13 years.
Yeah.
And it can be like yesterday.
Absolutely.
Tommy's youngest brother, Rick, and John Benzinger went to Tommy's grave in Sioux City the day the Ultimate album was released.
How does this make you feel, sitting up here today in the quiet? Do you miss your brother?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I do miss him.
Does it make you feel good, though, that people, maybe you can describe what that feels like?
Yes, it does. It really does. I was up here thinking before you came, and it's kind of hard, you know. But he knows the album's out. That's all that counts. I mean, he worked hard for it. Too many years. For a guy that had about a 6-year career professionally, he did what, guitar players don't even do in 20 years.
Well, Tom Zutaut, well, I call him the guardian angel, because he really is. I mean, he is, by putting this set out, he is helping the Bolin family to realize, hopefully, some of the monies that they may not have received in the past. And the fact that he has a passion for Tommy's music and has spread the word, and he is a guardian angel.
Well, I think, you have Jimi Hendrix, who straddled that fence, and you have Tommy Bolin, and now I think you kind of have guys like Steve Vai and Joe Satriani There are not a lot of them, you know. They're real special that, you know, you get a great musician who can be respected by other musicians, but then can also just get down and rock out and reach everybody, you know, from, you know, 15 to 30 and 40 in some cases and 50, you know. It's unfortunate that, you know, some of them had to, you know, die as early as they did. I mean, you know, it's a great loss. And, you know, the fact that Tommy's records were just unavailable to all these, you know, the next generation, so to speak, I mean, that was another thing that, you know, I felt, you know, that compelled me to do this, was just that, you know, this music shouldn't be lost. I mean, it should be available. To me, it's a crime when music gets lost. And, I mean, a lot of music does get lost. There are a lot of great records out of print.
So, for the uninitiated, what are they going to experience if they buy the Ultimate set? Somebody who appreciates rock and roll, appreciates good guitar music, what is somebody like that going to get when they buy this set?
A sense of history and of someone who is truly a great artist, and the ability to follow that artist from start to finish chronologically and see all the different steps he took and the growth of someone musically from, you know, it's kind of like watching a baby from being born to becoming an adult. And of course, you know, I think with Tommy, you know, we go from, like, you know, being a baby in music to almost being adult, but not quite, you know, because he, you know, he left us before he could finish.
Halfway gone, halfway back, you're always dreaming about what you lack. You're taking your time from your busy day to sit by the track and watch the train roll away. Dreamer, I know what you're thinking. I can see it in your face. Maybe before you were happy, but now your thoughts are on this place.
End your journey of hi-fi searching at Recycled Audio, Boulder's oldest and locally owned hi-fi store. We have one of the largest selections of new and pre-owned stereos and electronics in the country. Advisors to the National Blue Book on pre-owned equipment, all merchandise fully warranted with 100% trade-up for 1 year. Authorized dealers for Iowa, ADS, Boston Acoustics, Mission, Proton, KEF, and many others. Consult with any one of our professionals. We're located at 1615 Pearl Street in Boulder, Colorado. End your search at Recycled Audio.
You can always find the finest live music at the beautiful Boulder Theater. And don't miss December 29th and 30th, the Boulder Blues Club. January 12th, go dancing to Orchestra King Mama. January 13th, Atlantic recording artists, the Subdudes. January 19th, one of the great singer-songwriters, Delbert McClinton. And January 21st, don't miss the Roaches at the Boulder Theater. For more information, contact the ticket line at 444-3601.
Euromotion, a moving experience. If you're spanning the globe for that certain automobile, we have one of the finest collections of automobile art in the world. Call us at 303-781-1555. We are located at 2771 West Oxford Avenue in Englewood, Colorado. Euromotion, a moving experience.
I'm Mike Drumm. We hope you've enjoyed tonight's documentary on Tommy Bolin, The Ultimate. And now it's time to give away some of those great album sets from Geffen Records. Here it is, The Ultimate set. We've got them autographed by Jeff Cook. Of course, an incredible 24-page booklet, biography, pictures. It's really a wonderful set. Now to win, you have to write us a letter and tell us what you like about Tommy Bolin. We will pick winners based on who writes the best letters. So if you say, I like Tommy because he's cool, you probably won't win. Now, give us your phone number because we're going to call you for you to come and pick up your Ultimate set. We don't want to damage them in the mail unless you're out of state. So write us here at the Music Link and tell us what you like about Tommy. The address is the Music Link, care of KUBD, 9805 East Iliff Avenue in Denver, Colorado, 80231. And do join us here next week for another thrill-packed episode of The Music Link.
You're watching Dynamite Movies on KUBD TV in Denver and KDMD TV in Anchorage, Alaska. Also seen on Satcom 1 Transponder 12.
About some things that don't seem right, and my gun is cocked and loaded. I hope I get me some sleep tonight. Well, I don't know I'm wrong. It seems like nothing is right. Well, I don't know I've been wrong. I hope I get me some sleep tonight. Take it nice and easy. Leave the chorus in the pit. Don't let your mind push those things like a lot of my friends did. Just keep me out of LA. Things are crazy out there. The people that I've been meeting, seems I've got to beware. Well, I don't know I've been wrong. It seems like nothing is right. Well, I don't know I've been wrong. I hope I get me some sleep tonight. So take it nice and easy. Leave the chorus in the pit. Don't let your mind go so scared like a lion.